What a weird day it has been. The US government just announced ai.gov and with it, America's AI action plan. It's a bit of a wild ride. I've spent the last far too long digging into all the details, watching Trump's strange speech where he talks about everything from copyright to woke AI.
Very proudly terminated Joe Biden's order on woke AI effective immediately. You don't have any of those crazy rules. Crazy rule.
We don't want woke AI. We want AI models based on accurate information that give accurate information and accurate answers.
And also the response from our friends over at Anthropic, which is actually a pretty solid way of thinking about things. There is so much to cover here. All of the core bullet points, the PDF breaking down what it all actually means, and the legislation, the 3 pieces of it that Trump just signed into office. I go out of my way to make all of my coverage as unbiased as possible, just trying to collect the information and talk about it the way I would at lunch with my friends. As such, I have not accepted any money from anyone involved here, certainly not Anthropic or the US government. In fact, I think those are the 2 groups that take the most of my money every year. As such, someone needs to cover the bill for this video, so quick word from today's sponsor, and then we dive right in. AI tools with Cursor have me shipping way more code than I've ever written in the past, but that means there's a new bottleneck, code review. We constantly have PRs just sitting there waiting for someone to take a look at them before we can ship them, and honestly, most of the review work is pretty tedious. That's why today's sponsor has been helping us out so much. CodeRabbit has changed how we do code review. And I'll be honest with you guys, I was skeptical when I first heard about them when they reached out to sponsor. So I turned on my own repos and now we can't live without it. It has made our lives much better maintaining projects like T3 Chat. Here's an actual PR that Mark and I worked on in order to add settings sync to T3 Chat, and it caught real regressions before we shipped them. Here I was changing how the validator worked in order to store the data properly in convex instead of having it all come in through local storage. But I didn't properly rename the legacy validator in all the places it was being used, so we were using the wrong validator sometimes. I didn't even notice, and I'll be honest, I didn't notice because I had Claude do the coding in the first place. But as such, having another AI review the code and catch the mistake saved us a ton of time. And I was actually running into the edge case caused by this, didn't understand why, and just stopped thinking about it because I was dealing with other problems, but it actually solved the problem. And a new feature they added is prompt for AI agents. You can copy this prompt, go into your editor and just paste it, and it will apply the change directly. Super nice. It's even smart enough to update the comment when the issue is resolved, which is super nice. If that was all they did, it'd still be worth it, but they also do stuff like summarize the PR for you, describe each file that changed and what changed about it with a full walkthrough, and they'll even diagram out what's going on in this given PR. It's super nice. Almost forgot, they added a VS Code extension that works in Cursor as well, by the way. So you can review the code as you're writing it and not even need to push it up to GitHub. Super nice, because I was pushing things up just to trigger the CodeRabbit review to get feedback early. Now I don't have to, it's just in the editor. I'm so happy with CodeRabbit. I think you will be too. Check them out today at soydev.link/CodeRabbit. Introduction. America's in a race to achieve global dominance in AI. Winning this race will usher in a new era of human flourishing, economic competitiveness, and national security for the American people. Recognizing this, President Trump directed the creation of an AI action plan in the early days of his second term in office, based on the 3 pillars of accelerating innovation, building AI infra, and leading in the international diplomacy and security. This action plan is America's roadmap to win the race. Well, I can say from how well written this is that Trump had nothing to do with writing this actual report, so that's a good sign at least, right? For a site they built using Webflow, this is pretty. I'll give them credit. Also, the loading animation is really cool too, the opening. It's cute. Accelerate AI innovation. America must have the most powerful AI systems in the world. But we must also lead the world in creative and transformative application of those systems. Ultimately, it is the uses of technology that create economic growth, new jobs, and scientific advancements. America must invent and embrace productivity-enhancing AI uses that the world wants to emulate. Achieving this requires the federal government to create the conditions which private sector-led innovation can flourish. This is a controversial, but in my opinion, true statement. Whenever you're making decisions around stuff that has economic impact, it's a lot of different things you have to weigh. The 2 that matter here most obviously are, 1, what is the impact on the American workforce? Specifically, if you do lean into AI versus don't, what's the impact on the American workforce? But arguably more importantly, what's the impact on the American economy? Specifically, again, if we do or don't. If we do embrace AI, that's going to screw over a good chunk of the American workforce. We're going to have to figure out how we handle that as a country, as an economy, as an ecosystem. But if we don't, then we're risking a lot of potential on this other side, where if we don't take advantage of how AI can improve and impact the workforce, and China does, there's a real big danger that we lose certain sectors of the workforce. And I would argue these are sectors we don't want to lose. The fact that we have the majority of these high-paying, like white-collar jobs in our country right now is a good thing. We worked hard to get that. There is so much important work done in America. This is also why I'm concerned about all of the research and grants that are being cut right now. It's genuinely terrifying. But we need to keep as much of this like high qualification work as possible if we want our economy to stay as strong as it is. If we risk losing that as more of that type of work gets automated, we are risking our position as a global leader, which is terrifying. You might be wondering, where do other countries fit in here? Because I'm very focused on the US versus China. They're all fumbling so hard, I don't think they're relevant here. There's like 2 companies total that are even vaguely interesting out of Europe that are in the AI world. It's Mistral, who, if you've been around for a while, you know I couldn't give less of a shit about them, and Lovable, who is actually killing it. I'm very proud of what they're doing. Bias, obviously, I'm an investor in them, and they've sponsored the channel before. Those are the only 2 companies I know of in the EU that are doing anything interesting. Meanwhile, DeepSeek R1 tanked our economy temporarily because it was such a good model. And other innovations going on in China, like Kimi K2, has made me wholly disinterested in Grok 4. It's a tough balance. So knowing that, we have to think carefully about where we do and do not embrace AI, and also how we protect the American workforce in the process. This is what I was saying about the American workforce. American workers are central to the Trump administration's AI policy. The administration will ensure that our nation's workers and their families gain from the opportunities created in this technological revolution. The AI infra build-out will create high-paying jobs for American workers, and the breakthroughs in medicine, manufacturing, and many other fields that AI will make possible will increase the standards of living for all Americans. AI will improve the lives of Americans by complementing their work, not replacing it. That doesn't give me a lot of confidence. The infra build-out will create some high-paying jobs for some amount of time, but once the infra is built out, it's built out. It's a temporary workforce. On top of that, there's a lot of work that will be replaced by this AI. It doesn't really seem to address that beyond there will be breakthroughs, so the economy will handle it. No, not that simple. I'm scared if that's how they're putting this here, that they're going to be similarly simplifying throughout. Oh, here are the people who wrote this. Oh, David Sachs. Oh boy. If you've seen my recent videos, you know my feelings there. And Marco Rubio as well. This will be a fun read. Scared they didn't make this bipartisan at all. It's going to make this a bit interesting. And a good piece of context to have about why this all matters is the current state of models and where the best models come from. Of the top 10 models, so from here to here, 8 of them are US based. The concerning thing here is that the 2 that are not US based are both open models. So right now, China is very much leading in the open model race, even if the US is still leading in overall model intelligence. If you look at, again, the open weight models, we are not winning right here. You also notice that France is relatively low here. That's because the best models that Mistral puts out aren't actually open. In fact, the decent models that Mistral puts out aren't open weight. It's only the dumb ones now. I can't believe they get away calling themselves an open company. Yeah, thank you as always to Artificial Analysis for this incredibly useful coverage. It makes our lives significantly easier. God, the cash investment here is absolutely nuts. Anyways, let's go through these bullet points and what they actually have to say about them. This should be a fun deep dive. Okay, point 1 was the remove red tape and onerous regulation. America's private sector must be unencumbered by bureaucratic red tape. President Trump's already taken multiple steps toward this goal, including rescinding Biden's Executive Order 14110 on AI that foreshadowed an onerous regulatory regime. AI is far too important to smother in bureaucracy at this early stage, whether at the state or federal level. I have mixed thoughts on this one when it seemed like, because I don't know if you guys remember, back in the day, and by back in the day, I mean literally 2 years ago, Sam Altman was urging regulation for AI. You might be curious why he would do this when right now he seems relatively against this type of regulation. It's because some things changed. We go back to this chart, specifically looking at the model intelligence back in 2023. You'll see that up until the end of the year, the lead that OpenAI had was so absurd that nothing else really seemed like it was worth talking about. Even Claude 2 was half as intelligent as GPT. And for a long time, it seemed like OpenAI had a lead that was insurmountable. And slowly we saw other models appear like Claude 3 Opus, which was very surprisingly good, and 3.5 Sonnet, which was the groundbreaking moment for tool calling and a lot of the cool agentic stuff that we do. But until that point, it really seemed like good AI models were a somewhat novel thing to OpenAI. And since OpenAI didn't want to be the only company making these things, and more importantly, didn't want to self-regulate and potentially like bring in a disaster for the entire world and economy themselves, because their goal was always to make it so that multiple different people would have access to this level of intelligence. Like the stated goal of OpenAI was to make sure that the AGI revolution wasn't owned by one specific business. And that was why they were thinking the way they were at the time. Since then, there have been massive innovations where lots of other models are as smart as what they were cooking. But more importantly, a lot of these models are open. So imagine that there's regulation in the US that says your model can't be smarter than X or you will be regulated. And when I say X here, I'm not talking about Twitter. You know better. If this regulation existed in the US, it would make sense, especially at the time. They wouldn't want something at a certain level of intelligence to just appear and cause people to start doing crazy illegal things like making drugs or creating bombs and stuff like that. It would make a lot of sense for the government to come in and regulate before you cross this point, unless there are open source models that are just as smart. Then things start to fall apart. Remember this earlier in the year? There was a bill threatening to make using or downloading DeepSeek a crime in the US. Hilarious. But it shows just how much things have changed since then. In just 2 years, we went from Sam Altman pushing for us to find some way to regulate AI to the government trying to keep people from downloading too smart of a model. That's not how safety and security works. If it's illegal for people here to download this, first off, they're going to anyways. Second, even if they weren't going to, people outside of the country will and will do the same things and have a similar negative safety impact on our country. It's not that simple. We can't just ban it. We've kind of let the intelligence out of the box at this point. There was a certain level of intelligence that was like useful for autocomplete and helping you write emails that we had achieved in 2023. And it seemed like there was a path to much smarter. And more importantly, it seemed like that path was one that only a very small number of companies or individuals would be able to walk. Now that there are significantly more paths there and significantly more companies doing it, and also these large numbers of open weights and open models, that's no longer the case. There was a very real concern around the weights leaking as well. When OpenAI's models got smart enough, there's a real existential danger in the weights leaking so that bad actors could do things with it. Because it's my understanding that right now, the OpenAI models aren't super safe in a traditional sense. Like if you send a prompt to the model directly, that is, how do I finish manufacturing of this drug? The model would respond, but they have safeguards in place because you don't have direct access to the model. You have access to the model through a layer provided by OpenAI, and that layer can prevent you from doing things that are unsafe or risky. But if you have this super smart model that isn't very safe by itself, and then you have this layer that guards for illegal shit, every request has to go through this guard and either pass and get sent here or bounce back. If this part leaks and is just available freely for anyone to use however they want, that's dangerous. If you're wondering why the new OpenAI open weight models have been delayed so much, this is why. It's the first time in a long time, arguably first time ever, that OpenAI doesn't have their guard in front of a model. Because once they publish this, it's published. They can't walk it back. So if it does things like assist with illegal activity, violate copyright, or any other stuff that they might normally handle in this guard layer, that's really bad if this part goes out. And now that they're choosing to put this part out there, there's reason to be concerned. Chad asked, is the alternative baking the safeguards in during training? Yes, that seems to be the path forward, is trying to make it so the model will behave in a safe enough way by itself. And there are a lot of models that already do this, that'll just say, sorry, I can't answer the thing that you're asking. So it's entirely possible for them to make safeguards so that the model can't do the things they wouldn't want it to do. But that gets complex fast. Like just imagine trying to post-train a model out of regurgitating copywritten content. If it was trained on data that included fan stories about Mickey Mouse, how are you going to force it to never talk about Mickey Mouse? That's a tough challenge, and I can see why it's taking as long as it is for this model to come out, because they don't have their safeguard in front like they usually do. But since other companies have already made open models, a lot of the risk profile that OpenAI was trying to prevent has happened. OpenAI's goal was to, put it bluntly, make it so that this layer in front was heavily regulated, so that companies that were providing these really smart models would be required to have certain guarantees in front of the models so that certain things could or couldn't happen. But with so many models just forgoing this layer in front entirely and publishing the weights directly, it gets more complex. And that means that the previous attempt at regulating and the previous hope for regulation has gotten a lot more complex, a lot faster. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't regulate, but it does absolutely mean the shape of that regulation has changed on a fundamental level. Okay, so let's see what the actual recommended actions are according to the US government now. They won't allow for AI-related federal funding to be directed towards states with burdensome AI regulations. Okay, so they're explicitly trying to restrict the access to funding for AI stuff from California. The bipartisan nature of this is already starting to show very aggressively. Oh boy. Was wondering when that would happen. So for those who aren't familiar, there was regulation in California around making sure AI doesn't go rogue and take over businesses and immediately wipe out jobs. California has 18 AI laws. Oh boy. Sidebarring, so this is more readable. Okay, we'll skip that one because it has words that'll get me demonetized. But the first one we can all agree with. Criminalizes creation and distribution of non-consensual deep fakes. Cool. Makes sense. Social media platforms to establish reporting tools for users to report cases. Okay, so a lot of this is words I can't say on YouTube stuff that I think we can all agree with. Protects individuals from unauthorized use of their digital replicas and personal professional service contracts. This also makes sense. It's preventing companies from using your persona after you were to leave. Like if a company was to fire you and then need your voice for something, they can't use AI to replicate your voice. I think that's fair as well. Same with restrictions for deceased personalities for commercial purposes without prior consent from their estate. Also think this is fair. You shouldn't be able to keep using like an actor's voice after they die unless you have permission from the family or the estate. There are exceptions for news, satire, scholarships, documentaries, fleeting appearances, or specific advertisements. This actually seems reasonable. Large online platforms block or label materially deceptive election-related content, including deep fakes that could harm a candidate's reputation or election chances. This one's more vague, but I think I can agree with that. Regulations for AI-generated content in election advertising in California. Materially deceptive content also seems reasonable depending on definitions. Clear disclosure on political ads generated by or significantly altered by AI, aiming to prevent undisclosed AI use that could mislead voters. I don't even think this should be like politics specific. The idea of misleading AI advertising probably should be enforced, like pretty bad. Healthcare services, healthcare providers using Gen AI for patient communications have to include disclaimers that say that there was AI involved and instructs contacting a human healthcare provider. Reasonable. Only physicians, not AI systems, can make final decisions regarding medical necessity and health insurance utilization reviews. That makes sense. And then data privacy. Colorado and California have introduced laws to protect neural and biological data. Colorado's law, biological neural under yada, yada, yada. Cool. CCPA to categorize neural data as a sensitive personal information with new limits on its usage. Cool. So your brain scans can't be treated like they're not medical data. Makes sense. Businesses using AI system capable of generating or processing personal data. The data coming out of the AI is treated as personal data if the data going into the AI was personal as well. That all makes sense. So you can't like take personal data, throw it in AI, say summarize this, and then claim what comes out isn't personal. All of this is reasonable legislation. Covered providers as defined to provide users with tools to identify AI-generated content that is clear and conspicuous. To comply, the covered providers must offer a free AI detection tool. And here's where it gets more complex. Non-trivial to identify AI-generated content for a ton of different reasons. Curious to see how this one gets enforced over time, especially because it's not required till next year. Good luck, have fun. Blah. Like to January 1st this year, automatic dialing announcing devices with artificial voices in California. So companies that are using AI for phone calls have to first notify the recipient with a natural voice that an artificial voice will follow. Interesting. Then there's regulation for the state's use of AI. I like this idea of AI literacy into K through 12 like education. I want to see what that ends up looking like, but the idea of actually teaching AI literacy and media literacy in general to kids through elementary to high school sounds like a good idea. Working group for safe and effective use of AI in public schools. Public schools and just schooling in general is going to be hit so hard with AI. Like half the things I did in high school could be done with AI so quickly that I just wouldn't have learned anything. And then there was some legislation that was vetoed. So yeah, none of this is egregious at all. So I'm curious if they're going to take advantage of the existence of that legislation in order to prevent funding getting to California. I'm almost certain they will, but I would like to see them come out against those laws, especially like the first four, because those make so much sense. Anyways, they put out a request to businesses to give them information about regulations that hinder their ability to innovate, unleash prosperity through deregulation, discretionary funding programs to ensure, consistent with applicable law, they consider a state's AI regulatory climate. Okay, if I'm going to be realistic, one of the biggest hampers to innovation with AI in the US right now is that they're making immigration way too harder. There are lots of incredibly talented people around the world. Over half of postgrad students in like deep scientific research fields come from around the world and work and innovate within the US. There's no reason for us to not be going out of our way to let them in. We should have the best people from the globe working in the US to solve these problems, and we should go out of our way to make sure our immigration system is prepared to let us get the world's most talented people here to work on these problems. Oh, look at that. The word immigration doesn't appear a single time. Neither does H1. What a surprise. Ensure that frontier AI protects free speech and American values. Oh boy. This one of their key points from that first site. No, this is just another one of the points in this list. Oh God, we're gonna have to blast through this. They went way too ham. Interesting that they're talking about publishing evaluations of frontier models from China, specifically like the government publishing evaluations of models. Kind of crazy to think that we might have a competitor for our friends over at Artificial Analysis, but the competitor is the US government. Oh, this is a good point. Encourage open source and open weight AI. Right now, as I was saying, a lot of these open weight models are coming from China, partially because the regulation of using like Chinese services and infra in the US is strict, but also because it's one of the stronger ways for them to catch up and make their models more prolific in the US. Here's a fun link from some people that help a lot with information. Thank you, as always, Paradox, for dropping good links. Apparently, over half of the Meta superintelligence team are from China. So that shows, again, how valuable legal immigration is in the US. Like, look at the country list of where people came from. We need the ability for talented people to immigrate here because we want to win. If we want to be the best country in the world for developing AI, we need to be the best country in the world for the smart people to work in for that. Thank you again for sharing. So let's see what they have to say. Open source and open weight AI models are made freely available by developers for anyone in the world to download and modify. Models distributed this way have unique value for innovation because startups can use them flexibly without being dependent on a closed model provider. They also benefit commercial and government adoption of AI because many businesses and governments have sensitive data that they cannot send to closed model vendors. And they are essential for academic research, which often relies on access to the weights and training data of a model to perform scientifically rigorous experiments. We need to ensure America has leading open models founded on American values. Open source and open weight models could become global standards in some areas of business and academic research worldwide. For that reason, they also have geostrategic value. While the decision of whether and how to release an open or closed model is fundamentally up to the developer, federal government should create a supportive environment for open models. So their recommended actions are that they ensure access to large-scale computing power for startups and academics by improving the financial market for compute. Interesting. There's a lot of other pieces there. Remind me that we have to have a long conversation about TSMC and, of course, NVIDIA. There's a lot of complexity with Taiwan throughout all of this, so much so that I'm scared to even talk about it. Yeah. Companies seeking to use large-scale compute must often sign long-term contracts with hyperscalers, far beyond the budgetary reach of most academics and many startups. I have a rant about that. There's a thing that I recently heard that I can't stop thinking about. The Walmart versus small family store problem. This one I actually saw from a government hearing. There's an annoying problem with credit card processors. Okay, there's a lot of problems with credit card processors, but there's one in particular. You have to pay a 5% fee on transactions up to 100 mil a year or something like that. Then it's 3% on transactions up to 1 bill a year, and it's 1% going forward. This seems like an obvious type of thing you would do as a credit card processor for building loyalty with your companies that you're working with. You want to reward them for processing a lot of payments through your credit cards. The problem is that brute forces a small store to now be more expensive than Walmart. Even if their costs are smaller, even if they work their butts off to make everything as reasonable and cheap as possible, they can't compete because they have to eat this fee. And since the credit card companies have like triple dipped between the like credit card processing systems, the companies actually doing the payment stuff like Walmart and the other stores and the consumers who are getting the credit cards, there is a understanding from consumers they can use their credit card everywhere to a point where they don't bring other payment methods. And now as a result of that, people holding credit cards expect to go to the store and use it, and they don't understand the fact that they have to pay more at this store than they do at Walmart because the credit card company is giving Walmart a better deal. And that sucks for everyone involved. There's a lot of these like simple seeming economies of scale things that blow up really fast. Here's another one that we're dealing with T3 Chat, which if you're not familiar with, it's my AI chat app that I built because all of the AI chat apps suck and I wanted to make one that sucked less. I'm really proud of what we built with T3 Chat. It's super fast and nice to use. By the way, it's only $8 a month for access to every model. And if you're not already using it and you haven't signed up before, you can get your first month for $1 using code Whitehouse. The reason I bring up T3 Chat is because some of these models are very expensive. I've been playing with Kimi K2 a lot, which is quite cheap because it's an open weight model that's relatively easy to run. But if you compare that with something like Claude 4 Sonnet, the prices are very high. We have quite the bill with Claude. Anthropic's not cheap. And we're not even offering Opus, by the way. This is just our bill with Sonnet. Last month, we spent about 40 grand with Claude 4 Sonnet. It's brutal. It really is. So why do I bring this up? I bring this up because I hit up Anthropic to get a discount, and they offered us a discount. If we commit to $20K a month of spend for, I believe it was 3 months, it might have been more. If we were to do this, we would have gotten a discount. We would have gotten a whopping 5% discount on that committed spend. And to be clear, I think it is totally within the rights of Anthropic to offer things like this. But I am going to complain about it because it sucks. If Anthropic's model was to be trumped by something better, but we'd already committed to $20K a month of spend with them, now we have to spend that money even if we move to a different model. So it's like a hedging for them that guarantees we will spend at least this much money, and we only get a discount on whatever we commit to. We don't get discounts if we spend $25K, the extra $5K is full price. That's nothing. We'd be saving $1,000. This is the problem, though. Since we are a small company that is trying to stay flexible, we only would save $1,000 a month if we were to do this. If I had made this agreement, we would have saved $3,000 of the upwards of $40,000 a month we're currently spending with them. And if we had a month where we only spent $19,000 instead of $20,000, we would have lost all our savings immediately. Not great. But if we were bigger, if we were doing like, I don't know, $300K a month, we might be able to get a bigger discount. And to be clear, I don't know the numbers here, but I'd be surprised if we couldn't pull a 15% discount if we had a bigger spend commit, which would allow us to offer a cheaper rate to our customers. The fact that we're only charging $8 a month, despite the fact that we don't get the better like rates that a lot of these other companies do, is sad. And it's annoying as hell because these companies will charge $20 a month and be less generous than we are with $8, and we still look bad because we're more transparent about what you're getting for the money than our competitors are. And it sucks that being the more transparent, cheaper, honest option can look bad because people see unlimited messages and believe it when they see it, and then we get screwed at the bottom line. So I absolutely agree that making access to the compute and to the models cheaper for businesses like mine would help for us to compete, especially on the bottom dollar. As more and more we see the AI race getting commoditized, as we have more options that are more reasonable in price, having more equality in the pricing between big and small vendors alike will be beneficial for businesses like mine that are trying to compete with these large companies. I talk about this a lot, and I hate that I agree with this so far, but that's a fair point. They also want to partner with leading technology companies to increase the research community's access to world-class private sector computing, models, data, and software resources as part of the AI pilot. Cool. And then we have to enable AI adoption. Today, the bottleneck of harnessing AI's full potential is not necessarily the availability of models, tools, or applications. Rather, it's the limited and slow adoption of AI, particularly with large and established organizations. Let them be slow. Let the startups win. Let the economy do its thing. I thought we believed in free markets. Many of America's most critical sectors, like healthcare, are especially slow to adopt due to a variety of factors, including distrust and lack of understanding of the technology, complex regulatory landscape, and a lack of clear governance and risk mitigation standards. There's a lot of ways to fix the healthcare system, and reducing regulation is not likely to be a big one. I'm scared about that comment. I will also say, though, it's true. It's hard to get medical companies to start adopting AI tools. That's a statement that makes sense. That said, free fair markets are free fair markets. I invested in multiple companies because they found ways to get medical businesses interested in their AI tools. I think it's fair to play all sides here to an extent. I got feelings on this one. So let's see what they recommend here. They want to try first culture for AI across American industry. They want to establish regulatory sandboxes or AI centers of excellence around the country where researchers, startups, and established enterprises can rapidly deploy and test AI tools while committing to open sharing of data and results. They would be enabled by regulatory agencies like the FDA, Security Exchange Commission, with support from the DOC through its AI evaluation initiatives at NIST. The main specific efforts, so not like pretending they can regulate healthcare within like the FTC or some shit. They want something specific for healthcare and energy and agriculture. That makes sense. Is this all because they saw Snitch Bench and realized that all the models will snitch and they want that from the government side? Led by the DoD in coordination with the Office of Director of National Intelligence, Regulatory Update Joints, DoD, that's a lot of words that don't mean anything. Prioritize, collect, and distribute intelligence on foreign frontier AI projects that may have national security implications. Okay. I will say so far, this doesn't say anything that's really dumb about AI. A lot of the time when I read government AI stuff, there are a bunch of little details that are like, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. I haven't had anything in here that has been super scary. Oh boy, the Empower American Workers section. Let's hear what they say here right after I complimented the fact that it's not delusional so far. Scared. The Trump admin supports a worker-first AI agenda. By accelerating productivity and creating entirely new industries, AI can help America build an economy that delivers more pathways to economic opportunity for American workers. It will also transform how work gets done across all industries and occupations, demanding a serious workforce response to help workers navigate the transition. The Trump admin has already taken significant steps to lead on the front, including the April 2025 Executive Order 14278, advancing artificial intelligence education for American youth, and preparing Americans for high-paying, skilled trade jobs of the future. Interesting. Continue delivering on this vision, the Trump admin will advance a priority set of actions to expand AI literacy and skills development, continuously evaluating AI's impact on the labor market and piloting new innovations to rapidly retrain and help workers thrive in the AI-driven economy. Oh boy. Let's teach those miners how to code, guys. Sure, that will go well. We have a really good record with retraining out here. OpenAI has also committed to the education side. I missed this before. This was in early July. They're working with 400,000 teachers to shape the future of AI in schools. I'm so curious to see how this ends up going. Education is one of the big things that getting right with AI will be difficult. The impact is obvious and very destructive without a lot of care put in. And I am hopeful that the right involvement can protect education instead of destroying it. 6 in 10 educators are already using AI tools and report saving an average of 6 hours per week. It's very commonly known that one of the most grading things to do as a teacher, one of the biggest reasons for churn for teachers in education is the amount of time they have to spend grading homework. And that work isn't paid usually. They're paid for their hours at school. So if they're grading during their spare time there, cool. But when they're grading homework or they're grading tests at home, that's unpaid labor and it takes forever. Having help with that makes a ton of sense. But at the same time, there's a lot to think about here. So here's what the report says. They're going to have the Department of Labor and Department of Education. I thought that they were going to get rid of the Department of Education. Bring it back for AI. Fun. Promote integration of AI skill development into relevant programs, including career and technical education, workforce training, apprenticeships. Makes sense. Led by the Department of the Treasury, issue guidance clarifying that many AI literacy and AI skill development programs may qualify as eligible educational assistance under Section 132. Cool. This means that enables will be able to get tax-free reimbursement for AI-related training and help scale private sector investment in AI skill development. Support next-generation manufacturing. Oh boy. Wouldn't be a modern government workforce report if they weren't talking about manufacturing. That doesn't exist in the US anymore. There will be new types of innovations in manufacturing. Autonomous drones, self-driving cars, robotics, and other inventions for which terminology does not yet exist. It's crucial that America and our trusted allies be world-class manufacturers of these next-generation technologies. Good luck. World-class scientific data sets. This actually makes a ton of sense to give access to good data sets for people to train against. Right now, a lot of scientific research is gated in weird ways behind weird things, even though it's supposed to be publicly available. Giving better access to the data would actually lead to a pretty significant amount of innovation. It'd be cool if we could train against existing public research papers instead of scraping the internet for random garbage on Reddit. Working to get AI use cases for controlled access to restricted federal data is a little scary, though. Advance the science of AI by blocking the smartest people from getting into the US. Good luck with that. Recommended policy action. Prioritize investment in theoretical, computational, experimental research to preserve Americans' leadership in discovering new and transformative paradigms that advance the capabilities of AI. There are bullet points missing here that should be here that aren't. That is concerning. Good luck. Invest in AI interpretability, control, and robust breakthroughs. Yeah, making it so that we can understand what AI is outputting and why is important. If AI gets more obscure with its reasoning and we don't know why it's doing the things it's doing, we're screwed. Building an AI evaluations ecosystem. Very interesting. The idea of like government-led evaluations is something I'm actually in favor of. Like a nutrition card for a model that the government can analyze and put out is not something I'm opposed to if done right. I want to publish guidelines and resources through the NIST at DOC, including CAI, so many fucking abbreviations. Support the development of the science of measuring and evaluating AI models, led by a bunch of abbreviations. Convene meetings at least twice per year under the auspices of more abbreviations. Federal agencies and research community to share learnings, best practices on building AI evals. Again, like this doesn't feel like people who don't understand AI wrote it. It's nice to see an actual understanding of what does and doesn't matter to an extent here. This is solid stuff. I'm really excited now to read the response from our friends over at Anthropic. Kind of funny how I think about it. Like my two greatest expenses are taxes and Anthropic, and these are the two that I'm going to read my takes from here. Power collaborative establishment of new measurement science that will enable the identification of proven, scalable, and interoperable techniques and metrics to promote the development of AI. Makes sense. Accelerate AI adoption in government. With AI tools in use, the federal government can serve the public with far greater efficiency and effectiveness. This is why they signed a contract with Grok and Anthropic in pretty much the same day. I'm sure they're going to use it for a lot of interesting things, as well as the DoD. Interesting. Not what we're here for. Protect commercial and government AI innovations. This is make sure that we're ready to handle cyber attacks, insider threats, and other types of things. Combat synthetic media in the legal system. Oh boy. Again, protecting against explicit non-consensual deepfakes, very good thing, but there's more action needed for combating synthetic media. Cool, that's pillar one. The next two are a lot shorter, so don't feel like we're going to have to do all of that time again. Don't worry, we're blasting through this. Let's go back to the actual site for pillar two. Building American AI infra. AI is the first digital service in modern life that challenges America to build vastly greater energy generation than we have today. American energy capacity has stagnated since the 70s, while China has rapidly built out their grid. I saw a graph for this recently that was terrifying. This is how much energy that China produces versus the US produces from 1999 to now. Yeah, not good. Very not good. We need to embrace nuclear so badly, like so badly. I don't want to just rant forever about energy regulation and energy creation in the US, but the fact that we have moved away from nuclear is a like kind of hilarious thing. Like there are more deaths from people working on the windmills than there are from nuclear energy. It's pathetic. And now that there are more types of nuclear energy generation that are safer and more efficient and produce even less waste, we need to embrace it. I could rant about that for literal hours, but that's not what we're here for. We do need to catch up on energy, though, like badly. Otherwise, everybody will be complaining about all the water we're wasting. Yeah, we have to streamline permitting, strengthening and growing the electric grid, creating the workforce to build it all. I have a bad feeling they're not going to embrace nuclear in this at all. Oh, look at that. They do. Did not expect that. So first point was creating streamlined permitting for data centers, semiconductor manufacturing, and energy infrastructure. Okay, the semiconductor stuff we'll come back to. I want to talk about TSMC a bunch momentarily, but I was already talking about energy, so let's start with this. A grid to match the pace of AI innovation. Escalating demand driven by electrification and the technological advancements of AI, increasing pressures on the grid. The US must develop a comprehensive strategy to enhance and expand the power grid designed not just to weather these challenges, but to ensure the grid's continued strength and capacity for future growth. Last year, Microsoft started building their own nuclear power sources just for their own cloud like compute because they were not getting enough energy for a good enough price. Even just seeing what my energy bill is here is terrifying in California. Like we need more, better, cleaner sources of energy that will scale up as our need for energy scales too. Part one is stabilize the grid. We have to safeguard existing assets and ensure uninterrupted and affordable supply of power. We've seen some energy disasters recently across the globe, making sure that we can handle increasing loads for energy that are increasingly weird shapes of demand is very important. Especially we have something like similar to the heat we have in the US, where if it gets hot during the summer, everybody runs their ACs during the day. you have massive energy usage during the day and less so at night. If you also have massive energy usage because people are using AI during the workday, AI plus AC destroys our grid very quickly. Good luck stabilizing it. We need more power. And we need more on-demand power where we can ramp up and down the amount of power produced on demand. Very challenging. Also worth investing ways for large power consumers to manage their power consumption during critical grid periods to enhance reliability and unlock initial power on the system. And hopefully that doesn't mean that like Microsoft has to build their own energy, but right now it does. Prioritize interconnection of reliable, dispatchable power sources as quickly as possible. Embrace new energy generation sources at the technological frontier. Enhance geothermal energy, nuclear fission, and nuclear fusion. Reform power markets to align financial incentives with the goal of grid stability, ensuring that the investment in power generation reflects the system's needs. Yes, please. All of the above, yes. Create a strategic blueprint for navigating the complex energy landscape of the 21st century. Yeah, we need like a full plan for energy in the US, like really soon. The next section is what I've been meaning to talk about for a minute, the semiconductor manufacturing. This is something I happen to be very, very nerdy about and know probably more than I should as a software developer that doesn't do anything with silicon. I mean, I have the whole video with Casey Muratori where we go in depth on how little I actually understand about the processors and how they work, but the economic side of it and how the manufacturing stuff happens, I happen to know way too much about. And the thing that has concerned me here for a while is TSMC. TSMC is the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation. It's the company that makes the vast majority of chips in the world. So if you're running an Intel chip, an AMD chip, an Apple chip, an NVIDIA chip, basically whatever you're running, there's a very, very, very high chance that the actual silicon and the transistors on it, the semiconductors that actually exist on your processor, were built and possibly even laid there by TSMC. This has been the case for a very long time now because TSMC was built to do this better than anyone. TSMC was created by Morris Chang, who used to be working out of the US. He got multiple degrees from MIT. He worked at Texas Instrument in the 80s. After his time at Texas Instrument, he decided to move to Taiwan and be the head of the Industrial Technology Research Institute. But soon afterwards, in the late 80s, he founded TSMC. It's my understanding that he deeply believed that the future wasn't a couple companies doing the whole stack for their chip manufacturing. He cared more about the semiconductor side. How do you turn silicon into the actual transistors and semiconductors that we use in these chips? And if multiple companies wanted to make multiple different types of processors like GPUs, CPUs, low power CPUs, high power CPUs, phone processors, and all these different things, he wanted to take this one particular layer pretty far down, all the way back in the 80s when it seemed like that would make no sense. He had this strong belief that over time, more companies would want to own the top of this manufacturing stack and not be able to justify investing lower in the stack. And if he was to win there, he could sell effectively semiconductor manufacturing as a service to these other companies. And one of the first ones to go all in on it was Apple, and they won huge as a result. And slowly, more and more companies have realized they can't compete with TSMC's semiconductor side because they went real hard on it. Building one of these like manufacturing facilities, after you've planned everything and know exactly what you want to do with it, it still takes over 5 years just to break ground and actually get it moving at best if you spend way too much money. Sometimes it takes significantly more than that, which means a lot of the contracts that TSMC is making with these companies are inked many years out in order to try and get enough manufacturing ready for the chip designs these different companies are asking for. And now that almost every company trying to do like groundbreaking chips is moving to TSMC, this is a single dependency that's a scary one in particular because it's Taiwan. And I don't want to go in depth on the complex relationship between Taiwan, the US, and China, but just know it is complex. It's very complex. When you look at this chart, it seems bad because they have 60% of the manufacturing, but it's actually worse than it seems because if we were to rebuild this chart based on how much chip performance came out of TSMC, it would swing even harder in their favor. My guess would be 80+% because the best chips, the most powerful and most efficient chips, the ones that all of these companies are using for things like the brand new 5090s or the highest end Intel processors or the M4 chip in your MacBook, all of these are manufactured by TSMC. So the best chips are by them. Even if you were to quadruple how much Samsung or UMC is making, they're not making top class chips. They're not making the best chips in the world. TSMC is. And catching up to them feels nearly impossible because they are the leading, like, groundbreaking edge there. They've been doing it for so long. They have 40 years of industry expertise over the decades, building up their manufacturing process and everything between. catching up to them is going to be hellish if it's even possible. The vast majority of AI compute, like when you hit up any AI model from any provider, the single thing that you are the most likely to go through, the single thing that is like the most essential, the processing that actually generates that, it doesn't matter which AI model you're using, there's a 99.9% chance that the silicon that's actually going through that AI model, that's going through the weights and finding the right parameters to generate the correct output, 99.99% chance that TSMC laid the silicon that is doing that work. So having them being an external vendor that's so deeply laid in the bedrock of the AI revolution is terrifying, because that's a layer that we rely on so heavily and don't have a path out of relying on right now, which is why the US is so interested in investing in this semiconductor manufacturing. That all said, this is a thing that a lot of people have been trying to figure out how to do and how to make work in a world post TSMC. And Intel's attempts to do this have nearly bankrupted the company. So I wish us luck here. I'm not sure we can possibly bring semiconductor manufacturing back to US soil. There's a certain level of expertise that just doesn't exist here, a certain level of history that we just don't have here. And we don't have the incentives, the structure, any of the things. They're creating a CHIPS program to try and incentivize semiconductor manufacturing in the US. I don't know what that's going to do. I really don't think we can win here, but we should be trying more if we want to not have this one dependency that is part of a country that's in a chaotic state of flux due to the nature of geopolitics. It's a scary dependency for us to all have. That said, TSMC is actually working on bringing some plants to the US, which is a very, very good thing. If we actually have TSMC manufacturing in the US, that does help a lot. But as you can imagine, the complexity of this doesn't go away anytime soon. Yeah, they've invested $100 billion in the US in order to try and spin up manufacturing in Arizona, which will hopefully go well and allow more global distribution of where the chips are actually being manufactured. Very hopeful that goes well.
Grow that baby and let that baby thrive.
So next, I want to talk about copyright stuff, because we all just had to watch that weird Trump chat, the live White House press thing about this AI stuff. Most of it was useless drivel about things entirely unrelated to AI, but then you just randomly say AI every once in a while. He said AutoPen a lot too, which was weird. But he did talk a bit about an interesting concept with copyright.
You can't be expected to have a successful AI program when every single article, book, or anything else that you've read or studied, you're supposed to pay for. Gee, I read a book, I'm supposed to pay somebody. And, we appreciate that, but you just can't do it because it's not doable. And if you're going to try and do that, you're not going to have a successful program. I think most of the people in the room know what I mean. When a person reads a book or an article, you've gained great knowledge. That does not mean that you're violating copyright laws or have to make deals with every content provider. China's not doing it, and if you're going to be beating China, and right now we're leading China very substantially in AI, very, very substantially, and nobody's seen the amount of work that's going to be bursting upon the scene, but you have to be able to play by the same set of rules. So
if I read a book and it makes me smarter, do I have to pay the author every time I use that knowledge? This is a very crude way of thinking about the complexity of copyright in AI, because there's a very real problem here. If you take knowledge that you paid for or is semi-freely available, like let's say you scour the New York Times and get all of the information from New York Times. You pump that into an AI model and then give out effectively free New York Times, where you can get the content of the articles without even having it attributed to the original articles. And now New York Times doesn't get their ad rev, their subscription money, or anything else they were getting before. There's a real problem here of providing market alternatives to existing goods. If someone makes their money off of producing content and you redistribute that content without the method for them to make that money, that is illegal. And there's a real question here of what counts as redistribution of that content. It's more complex than most people want to admit. I am one of the few that will say, this is not a simple problem with simple solutions. We need to think a lot about how we as a nation want to approach this and how we want to think about regulation for this. If knowledge is used to create these models, and now these models can be used to do things that you previously would have paid for the knowledge to do, this is a complex problem. Because if a human was to do this, if your option was to spend money on research, pay money to go to college and do all these different things, or you can pay someone who went to college and read the research to do the task for you, that's obviously makes sense. You're paying somebody for the time and money they spent building this knowledge. So if a company was to spend 10 million on data and then spend 150 million on training, power, etc., at what point is it fair for them to use the data that they paid for in ways that the data providers might not want? Like, what does the ratio have to be? Because if I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on my education in 5 years, it's not expected that I pay dividends to every piece of research into my university going forward when I use what I learned from it. Is the answer as simple as there is no ratio here because the models aren't people? Is it knowledge that's freely available can be used? Is it knowledge that's existed for a certain amount of time or is owned in certain ways be used? This is complex. And where it gets way more complex is that copyright law doesn't apply in different places the same way it does here. We already see this a lot with counterfeit goods. If you were to try to manufacture a fake Nike or a fake Louis Vuitton anything in the US, you would be busted almost immediately, very quickly. Even trying to sell it here, you would be likely to be busted pretty quickly, which means that there is a full big industry of manufacturing counterfeit goods in other nations that is competing with the correctly manufactured and like rightfully owned options in the US. I would argue, and I hope this isn't a controversial take, I would argue it's unfair that Nike has to compete with counterfeits. I hope we can all agree on this point. The fact that companies like Nike can follow the law, own their copyright and trademark, and manufacture in the US, and now have to fight counterfeit goods as a significant portion of where the revenue that could be theirs is going, that sucks. That's a thing that isn't good. But there's a spectrum of inspiration to counterfeit, where a counterfeit good would be a person purchasing a thing either thinking it's the actual good or they are thinking that it will pass as the original good, which is their goal. Their goal is to look as though they own an official Nike thing. If another company was to make a similar good that served the same purpose but wasn't branded as Nike, they would be less interested in it and it would be less valuable in general. The reason I bring this up isn't because I think that using ChatGPT is like the counterfeit version of New York Times. I bring this up because of a very real thing. Like, counterfeit goods are largely manufactured in China. So is official Nike stuff, China and India primarily. But the counterfeit industry is one that is largely owned by China because they don't crack down on it very hard. So let's talk about AI again. What happens if, hypothetically, US companies are heavily restricted from training on copywritten data, but China doesn't enforce the same? This is a very real concern. If US companies were to scrape the web for publicly available information, have these data sets that they want to train on, and over time, there's more regulation preventing them from using the data they've already collected, but in China, that isn't enforced, that is possibly really bad. That would give Chinese models a very real advantage over American ones. If a Chinese model was trained on information that US models don't have access to, it would be able to be smarter. And if we end up at a point where models in the US are hampered by the fact that we have stricter copyright laws, that would put us at a real, global disadvantage, which is why it's important for us to find a balance here, where original content creators are paid fairly for the use of their data in these things. And ideally, there's information that is given to US-based companies and for US-based training that is not accessible in other places. And that's one of the few things I heard through a lot of this that I actually think would be huge. If US-funded research was provided as training data to US-based AI companies, that would help counteract this concern. If China gets access to copywritten stuff, like if Chinese models have access to Disney crap, cool, they can make a fake script for a new Mickey Mouse movie. But the US ones are given access to US research that other places don't have as easy access to. That could be a way to counteract this. Finding ways to provide the data that we need to train these models in a way that doesn't put us like a step behind other nations is important. And we need to make sure when we think about copyright laws that we're considerate of the fact that other nations won't follow these laws. And if we do too much to restrict the way that US companies can train, we are inherently giving an upper hand to other nations that won't enforce the same things. This is a complex thing. I'm not going to pretend I have some magic solution. I'm certainly not going to pretend that this is going to magically solve everything here. This is an example of a real dynamic that we should be considerate of, and I would hope that this legislation and research committee puts time into figuring these things out. Yeah. So Trump pretending that AI is just your brain, so putting the information into the AI means that it can use it however it wants, that's not true or fair. That's absolutely not true or fair at all. There has to be a balance here. And I think over time, we will go the wrong way in different directions where we're too restrictive, we're too permissive. We hop back and forth until we find somewhere that we feel good about, that compensates people fairly and results in models that are best in class. And at the same time, we're finding more and more that synthetic data is incredibly valuable for a lot of this training. But we have a lot of work to do before we'll be in a proper place with all of this. Like, so much work to figure all of that out. Speaking of which, Trump couldn't help but go on tangents about woke AI, which is very concerning to me, not because I want AI to be woke, but I'm concerned because the politicization of training data and model behaviors has the potential to be really bad. Like, there's a reason that we have the free speech laws we have in the United States, because we don't want the media and the sources of information to be run by the government. If the government is restricting what we can and cannot train on and what we do or do not expect the outputs of these models to be, that could lead us down a very bad slippery slope. I know slippery slope's a fallacy. It's not here. It's a very real path to danger, where if the government says the science needs to go this way, it can't go other ways, bias implicitly through there is terrifying. And if companies want to train models certain ways that aren't violating copyright laws, ownership, or like giving access to unsafe information, that should be the company's right and reason to do that. But at the same time, the models that they're all like saying are anti-woke, like Grok 4, is also the most likely to snitch on you to the government, which is very funny that these models that are supposedly anti-woke are also the biggest snitches. And the models that are supposedly really woke, like the ChatGPT models, will not snitch on you to the government, and maybe on very rare cases, and this is the tamely test. We're not even telling the model to act boldly. We're just telling the model that it's here to help us audit information and store it in our log systems. But by having access to email, or in my favorite test, giving access to the CLI, you'll see that open AI models will not try and break out and contact the government or media through that. But Grok ones will 85% of the time. We saw what happens when you try to go non-woke with AI. We end up with Mecha Hitler. Absolutely agree. Yeah, so that was concerning. What else do we have in this? High security data centers. Yep, probably a thing that we need. Train a skilled workforce for AI infra. Probably worth doing. Bolster critical infrastructure cybersecurity. Yep. Promote secure by design AI technologies and applications. Yes. Promote mature federal capacity for AI incident response. Yeah, if there are AI incidents like big security issues, the government should be ready to go with funding and everything else needed. And now for pillar 3, the lead in international AI diplomacy and security. Oh boy, this is where the exporting stuff happened. This also came up. It was one of the things that Trump just signed via executive order. Exporting American AI to allies and partners. The US must meet global demand for AI by exporting its full AI tech stack, hardware, models, software, applications, and standards to all countries willing to join America's AI alliance. Failure to meet this demand would be an unforced error, causing these countries to turn to our rivals. The distribution and diffusion of American technology will stop our strategic rivals from making our allies dependent on foreign adversary technology. Yeah, the fact that other countries, for various reasons, from tariffs to concerns about economic clients to just getting better stuff for cheaper, would go to these open models from China or to these gimped models from Mistral instead of going with the best models from the US is a real concern, and making sure that's handled at every level, be it giving better open models, focusing more on distributing the models that we have. Yeah, I'm concerned what this legislation would look like, but I can get why this is a thing. Oh, look at that. Counter Chinese influence on international governance bodies. The United States supports like-minded nations working together to encourage the development of AI in line with our shared values, but too many of these efforts have advocated for burdensome regulations, vague codes of conduct that promote cultural agendas that do not align with American values. Okay, this is the anti-woke piece. Strengthen AI compute export control enforcement. This is another one of the things we've done where we try to prevent China and Chinese companies from getting access to the best and most powerful compute. One of the things that we restrict is the ability to network GPUs using some of the insane technologies NVIDIA has to connect 500 GPUs with insane bandwidth between them. We restrict China's access to these things. And as a result, they end up working around it with really clever, novel design like we see with a lot of the DeepSeek papers. But at the same time, it does restrict the ultimate capabilities. There are workarounds, though, and making sure that those are plugged is probably worthwhile. That said, the manufacturing is happening in Taiwan, so it is hard to restrict things from getting to China. Hence, the plugging loopholes in existing semiconductor manufacturing export controls. Must continue to lead the world with path-breaking research and new inventions in semiconductor manufacturing. The U.S. must also prevent our adversaries from using those innovations to their own ends in ways that undermine our national security. Export controls, cool. Line protection measures globally. Encourage partners and allies to follow U.S. controls and not backfill. Yep. And then the evaluation stuff. We need to make sure the U.S. government is at the forefront of evaluating national security risk in frontier models. I like this idea a lot. The idea of the government running their own evals, their own benchmarks, their own nutrition labels for AI. This is the type of regulation I actually really like. The idea of the government having their own evals to test for these things. Like, snitch bench should not be a thing I run as a YouTuber. These types of things should be done by agencies that we can trust. As much as I love artificial analysis and I'll continue using them as a source indefinitely, we need to have that as well as official government funded sources. Like, this is stuff that we need to have standardized. At the same time, the government funding for CVEs was just cut. CVEs are the process for managing exploits in different services. And the idea of the DHS funding getting cut for this is really, really bad. Like, really bad. Like, the common vulnerabilities and exposures process is essential for how we manage global security incidents. I'm scared. Yeah, we need to bring back CVEs and do this. This should all happen at the same time. Thankfully, CVEs have had their funding extended, so this isn't an immediate issue yet, but it's a very real risk, and we need to make sure that money goes to the CVE program, because if this goes away, we don't have a centralized source of exploits that can affect people's data. Very important. Invest in biosecurity. Reasonable. The idea of like brain waves being handed to AI from all over the globe and treated with different levels of medical like confidence, and like the fact that like brain waves aren't included in HIPAA yet is concerning. Getting all of this addressed is probably a good idea. And that's it for their reporting. Now for the thing that made me want to look into all this in the first place, the Anthropic response. Today, the White House released the Winning the Race, America's AI Action Plan, comprehensive strategy to maintain America's advantage in AI development. We are encouraged by the plan's focus on accelerating AI infra and federal adoption, as well as strengthening safety testing and security coordination. Many of the plan's recommendations reflect Anthropic's response to the Office of Science and Technology policy prior to the request for information. While the plan positions America for AI advancement, we believe strict export controls and AI development transparency standards remain crucial next steps for securing American AI leadership. Accelerating AI infra and adoption. The action plan prioritizes AI infra and adoption consistent with Anthropic's submission to the OSTP in March. We applaud the administration's commitment to streamlining data center and energy permitting to address AI's power needs. As we stated in our OSTP submission and at the Pennsylvania Energy and Innovation Summit, without adequate domestic energy capacity, American AI development may be forced to relocate operations overseas, potentially exposing sensitive technology to foreign adversaries. If we don't have energy here, we have to spin up this infrastructure elsewhere. It'd be way cheaper to train an AI model in China than it would be here, because power is way cheaper, and power quickly becomes one of the biggest expenses. Really dangerous. A recently published Build an AI in America report details the steps the administration can take to accelerate the build-out of our nation's AI infra. We look forward to working with the administration on measures to expand domestic energy capacity. Plan's recommendations to increase the federal government's adoption of AI also include proposals that are closely aligned with Anthropic's policy priorities and recommendations to the White House. These include tasking the Office of Management and Budget to address resource constraints, procurement limitations, and programmatic obstacles to federal AI adoption, launching a request for information to identify federal regulations that impede AI innovation, updating federal procurement standards to remove barriers that prevent agencies from deploying AI systems, and promoting AI adoption across defense and national security applications through public-private collaboration. Cool. Democratizing AI's benefits. We're aligned with the action plan's focus on ensuring broad participation in and benefit from AI's continued development and deployment, continuation of the National AI Research Resource. Again, Shows that students and researchers across the country can participate in and contribute to the advancement of AI frontier. Happy that that's still going. Growing secure AI development. Again, happy that it's being promoted. Then the need for a national standard. Beyond testing, we believe basic AI development transparency requirements, such as public reporting on safety testing and capability assessments, are essential for responsible AI development. I agree, in particular, that this should be standard. There's a very real optics problem right now where when Anthropic does like best-in-class safety testing, and then they publish their report more transparently than most do, including the original like report card for Claude 4 that inspired Snitchbench, the response to that isn't, wow, thank you, Anthropic, for being so transparent. It's, wow, looks like Anthropic is bragging that their models will snitch on you to the government. If different model companies and different AI providers hold themselves to different standards about what they do and don't disclose, it's very easy for misinformation like that to spread, and there's a massive disadvantage for the companies that are trying to be more transparent. If those disclosures become part of like a government national standard, that type of response goes away. If this is no longer the company choosing to disclose things, it is instead the government requiring disclosures and having a set of tests that we've agreed on to show what these models do and don't do, this is a good thing. They've even proposed a framework for this, apparently. Develop and implement secure development frameworks, catastrophic risks defined, secure development framework minimum standards, minimum transparency requirements where they have to disclose certain types of things, including publishing system cards, and then enforcement where if you intentionally mislead on your statements, then you have 30 days to cure, otherwise you'll be sued. That all seems reasonable. Leading labs, including Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google DeepMind, have already implemented voluntary safety frameworks, which demonstrates that responsible development and innovation can coexist. In fact, with the launch of Opus 4, we proactively activated the ASL3 protections to prevent misuse for chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear weapon development. This precautionary step shows that far from slowing innovation, protections help us build better and more reliable systems. We share the administration's concern about overly prescriptive regulatory approaches creating an inconsistent and burdensome patchwork of laws. Ideally, these transparency requirements would come from the government by way of a single national standard. However, in line with our stated belief that a 10-year moratorium on state AI laws is too blunt an instrument, we continue to oppose proposals aimed at preventing states from enacting measures to protect their citizens from potential harms caused by powerful AI systems if the federal government fails to act. So they're in favor of states' rights. Never thought I would see the day where the supposedly woke AI company is coming out defending states' rights, and the supposedly really conservative government is coming in to trample states' rights. But here we are. Maintaining strong export controls. The action plan states that denying our foreign adversaries access to advanced AI compute is a matter of both geostrategic competition and national security. We strongly agree. That's why we are concerned with the administration's recent reversal on exports of the NVIDIA H20 chips to China. Interesting. They're saying that the government isn't banning hard enough here. AI development has been defined by scaling laws. The intelligence and capability of a system is defined by the scale of its compute, energy, and data inputs during training. While these scaling laws continue to hold, the newest and most capable reasoning models have demonstrated that AI capability scales with the amount of compute made available to a system working on a given task, or inference. The amount of compute made available during inference is limited by a chip's memory bandwidth. While the H20's raw computing power is exceeded by chips made by Huawei, as Commerce Secretary Lutnick and Undersecretary Kessler recently testified, Huawei continues to struggle with production volume, and no domestically produced Chinese chip matches the H20's memory bandwidth. And in particular, with H20s, the bandwidth of memory between chips is an important thing, and it's my understanding that the H20s sent to China are not allowed to have the official NVIDIA methods for combining them so that they can share data at really high bandwidth methods. I forgot the name of the new thing. It's like the alternative to NVLink for this infrastructure stuff, but that's not allowed, is my understanding. The H20 provides unique and critical computing capabilities that would otherwise be unavailable to Chinese firms and will compensate for China's otherwise major shortage of AI chips. To allow export of the H20 to China would squander an opportunity to extend American AI dominance just as a new phase of competition is starting. Moreover, exports of US AI chips will not divert the Chinese Communist Party for its quest for self-reliance in the AI stack. To that end, we strongly encourage the administration to maintain controls on the H20 chips. These controls are consistent with the export controls recommended by the action plan and are essential to securing our growing America's AI. You get the idea. They're in favor of this. The alignment between many of our recommendations and the AI Action Plan demonstrates a shared understanding of AI's transformative potential and the urgent actions needed to sustain American leadership. We look forward to working with the administration to implement these initiatives while ensuring appropriate attention to catastrophic risks and maintaining strong export controls. Together, we can ensure that powerful AI systems are developed safely in America by American companies, reflecting American values and interests. Good reporting. Wild how much Anthropic and the Trump government agree. Obviously, there's a lot of incentive for them to agree because they're going to get tons of tax breaks and tons of help manufacturing. They've been stating these things for a long time now, though. So, yeah. Thank you, chat, for clarifying. If you think this is the first time they're doing something like this, you're wrong. Here's back in April, securing America's compute advantage, Anthropic's position on the diffusion rule. Again, pushing really hard to make sure the best chips are from here and stay here. The diffusion framework also creates a 3-tier system based on national security risk. Tier 1 includes close allies with few restrictions. Tier 2 is most other countries with some limits. And then Tier 3 is adversarial nations with strict controls. This is the rules that Trump was saying they're getting rid of because the Biden diffusion rules are really bad. Yeah. Chinese AI companies like DeepSeek openly acknowledge that chip restrictions are their primary constraint, requiring them to use 2 to 4x more power to achieve similar results to US companies. They also likely use frontier chips for training their systems, and export controls will force them into less efficient Chinese chips. They also had to invent some novel processes to handle the restrictions they had too. So they worked hard on a lot of different sides to solve these problems, but it does show that this works. What a ride that one was. From woke AI to Chinese infrastructure to so much more. There's a lot of good in this, but also some concerning pieces. I am hopeful that this does set the US in the right direction, and I'm thankful that this at least seems like it was written by people who understand what AI is and what risks exist. It's still a bit strange, and I'm still concerned about where things will go long term, but at the very least, I do feel like we're somewhat on the right foot. Let me know what you guys think, and until next time, peace nerds.